Come read with me. I'm reading today from my book, It Takes Two, a little bit me and a little bit you. And this is the second book in the series, As I Recall. We're reading in the chapter, Leaving Home. And this is Dell's voice here. Sorry I can't do his voice. Prior to going to Vietnam, I was sent to Fort Lewis, Washington, which was the point of deportation for Vietnam. Since I had just married Violet and we only had 3 weeks together, her sister volunteered to drive us from California to Fort Lewis, Washington, so we could have at least a couple more days together. After arriving at Fort Lewis, I was signed in and was told that because I was married, that I could spend one more night with my wife and report in the next morning at 07:30 hours for processing. So Violet and I went to a friend of my wife's sister's and spent the night there. The next morning I reported in, and Violet and her sister and brother-in-law left and headed back to California. So then we processed to leave for Vietnam. It turned out that we had to wait a day or two for our flight to be assigned to us before we were ready to go. Upon departure from Fort Lewis, we were taken by bus to the STAC airport, Seattle-Tacoma Airport. That's what it stands for. All of us heading for Vietnam. Approximately 250 of us were put on a commercial airline and flown to Vietnam. En route, we stopped in Anchorage, Alaska for a short stop. We left Anchorage and flew directly to Japan. We had a 1-hour layover in Japan to refuel. Then we took off and flew to Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam. Cam Ranh Bay had a naval base. They had an Air Force base and they had an Army base. It was incoming processing for all of them. The Marines go where the Navy goes. We were issued our plain green fatigue pants, which had side pockets on the legs. The cuffs had strings so that they could be bloused, and the type of material that would dry fast when we got wet. The jacket fit very loosely, had long sleeves with huge pockets on the sides. The combat boots were called jungle boots and had a steel plate in the bottom of them so that if you stepped on a pongi stick, they wouldn't penetrate them. But the sides and the heels were leather. The upper sides were canvas so that they would dry quickly. The soles were rubber. We also got a canteen and a first aid kit that weren't mentioned before. Occasionally, they would give us a hot meal, but that was very, very rare. The first day there, we went to the Army mess hall, which consisted of a tent with some stoves and cooks in it. We got in this tent and they put some slop on your plate. Then you went out the end of the tent to some picnic tables with the flies trying to eat your breakfast, lunch, or dinner. This was the Army's idea of a mess hall for the soldiers. For breakfast, it was powdered scrambled eggs, bacon or sausage, toast that was soggy, bread, coffee, and maybe orange juice if you were lucky, and a carton of milk. Dinner could be mashed potatoes and gravy with meat of some kind or a vegetable, peas, or corn. But the food was not well thought out, not well prepared, and were awful. However, I was informed by one of the guys that had been there a day or two that if I jumped on a bus and went around the bay to the Air Force base, the food was much better. So I went with this guy who showed me where the Air Force mess hall was. It was a huge metal building with air conditioning. When you walked through the doors, it was like walking into a restaurant. There were enough tables to seat about 300 people with chairs and with tablecloths on them. When we went through the chow line, you hardly ever had to wait in line. When they served breakfast, you were asked how you wanted your eggs cooked, fried or scrambled, and sunny side up or over easy. You could have as many as you could eat. As you went further down the line, there was bacon, sausage, biscuits, or toast, choice of cereals, chocolate, or regular milk, coffee with cream and sugar, and orange juice. That would be an Air Force type of breakfast. The noon and evening meal in the Army was maybe cooked well, maybe not. When you went through the Air Force mess hall, all the food was cooked properly. There were several choices of meats, potatoes, mac and cheese, rice pilaf, usually at least 2 or 3 types of dessert, including ice cream, and your choice of drinks. They had soda pop, milk, coffee, and choice of juices. Another thing about the Air Force, you took your tray and passed it through a window when you were done eating, and it was cleaned properly, dried, and put back in the line. In the Army, when you finished eating, they had 2 big pots, hot soapy water, and hot water with a long-handled scrub brush. You'd put your tray in each hot pot and did your own dishes. KP would come around and pick them up and take them around and put them back on the line for another soldier to use. If you were clean-minded, you would do a good job of cleaning your plate. But if you weren't, you wouldn't do such a good job before it would be put back on the line for another soldier to use. And that is the difference between the Army and the Air Force, or the Navy. As an Army soldier, you were expected to clean up after yourself. The reason I'm telling you this is that it seemed very wrong that here we were, the soldiers, going out into the field, living like animals, sleeping in the mud, spending time in the rain, eating sea rations for almost a year straight just for survival, and here we were in a base camp that should have been a decent place for us to eat, and it wasn't available to us. But all the troops that were in the Air Force and the Navy, who never had to suffer those hardships, had all this available to them all the time. It seemed very unjust and unfair to me. Cameron Bay was almost like a resort area. Some of the service personnel, such as the ones that ran the buses, company clerks, and pay clerks who did all the money exchanges, had boats, skis, and swimming pools available to them. This seemed like a privileged post for some. It also had a large post exchange like a Walmart that carried everything, where the people could shop. They had several clubs, enlisted men, officers, etc. Cameron Bay was a secure area, and the people securing the area were the Armies and the Marines. If you were stationed at Cameron Bay, it was figured as a very easy duty, except it was considered a combat zone and you could get combat pay. But you weren't in any combat. It was the first station for the troops coming into Vietnam. When I was leaving, I was there for 3 days. Coming in, I was there for 2 days. Just prior to leaving, we were taken to a payroll center, and all of our MPC, or military pay currency, was exchanged for American money. We were given all the money the Army owed us. They might owe you money because it was the end of the month. That is basically for Cameron Bay. As I said, I was very upset with the way the Army took care of their people in Vietnam. I don't think they took care of us like they should have, compared to the Navy or the Air Force. That's my opinion. I thought it was very unfair.